After question period today, the House will be dealing with written questions on the order paper, together with motions for return. Immediately following that, if there is time, the House will deal with a motion as proposed by the member for Cypress Redcliffe, Alan Highland, dealing with the matter of water management, including the construction of reservoirs and drainage systems in the province. The House has been dealing with second reading of a number of bills, and also will be commencing the estimates of the Heritage Savings Trust Fund probably later this evening.
Mr. Speaker.
Let us pray. Our Father, keep us mindful of the special and unique opportunity we have to work for our constituents and our province. And in that work, give us both strength and wisdom. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table with the Assembly copies of the Public Service Commissioner's annual report for the calendar year 1987.
Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to table the annual report of the Alberta Foundation for the Performing Arts for the year ended March 31, 1987.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my pleasure to table for the information of all members of the Assembly the text of a petition circulated by residents of the Lake District in Edmonton Glengarry that was presented to the Minister of Education yesterday, stating the reasons for their request for an elementary school in their neighbourhood.
Introduction of special guests.
Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and members of the Assembly Victor and Margaret Dawson, who reside in the constituency of Edmonton-Norwood. They have a special visitor, however, with them, Nora Sayer from London, England, who I understand just arrived yesterday. They're in the public gallery. I'd ask them to stand and receive the traditional welcome from the Assembly.
Member for Edmonton Mill Woods, followed by the Solicitor General and then the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce to you and the other members of the Assembly this afternoon the special visitor who's seated in your gallery, Dr. Myrna Anaya from El Salvador. Dr. Anaya is currently a refugee in Canada since her husband was murdered by a death squad recently for his involvement with the Human Rights Commission there, and she's traveling across the country now explaining the situation in her home country to Canadians. I'd ask her to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Solicitor General.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure today to introduce to you and through you to the Assembly 57 grade 8 students from the Charlie Killam School in the Camrose constituency. They're accompanied by 3 of their teachers, Mr. Earl Moan, Mr. Art Fadum, and Mr. Bob Wall. I'd ask them to stand in the members' gallery and receive the traditional welcome of the Assembly.
Government House Leader, followed by the Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly from the Holy Cross Elementary School 39 students in grade 6 who are accompanied today by their teacher, Mrs. Manuela Ferrante, and a parent, Mrs. Edna Nichols. I would ask that they rise and receive the usual warm welcome of the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to note in the members' gallery that we have a veteran Calgary alderman who's with us once more. She served Calgary well and for a long period of time, and I'd ask Barb Scott to rise and receive the welcome of the Assembly once more.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism. Mr. Speaker, the Alberta Foundation for the Literary Arts is chaired by another failed candidate for a PC nomination, Dr. Howard Platt. But more importantly, on April the 22nd, 1988, the minister wrote to Dr. Platt announcing that he intends to provide direction to the foundation on the awarding of lottery funds. That is, who gets what, Mr. Speaker? Great. My question to the minister, does the minister fail to appreciate that this type of political interference with arm's-length administration of lottery funds makes the foundation into nothing more than a vehicle for pork barrel politics?
That's right.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition made some comments about the chairman of the foundation, which I would take exception. The chairman of this foundation, and in fact all foundations, are wonderful citizens of Alberta performing excellent service for the people. But it is this minister's responsibility to ensure that the funds that are available through the department and those that are approved under lottery funding are expended very carefully and in coordination for the benefit of the receivers.
They're being spent very carefully, no doubt about that, Mr. Speaker. The minister letter actually gives orders to the foundation and how it is to spend all of the money, $1,125,000. That's how carefully they're spending it. My question is, could the minister explain, he's telling what wonderful citizens these people are, could he explain then why his judgment is better than qualified professionals working through the foundation? Is it because his top priority is to get re-elected in his own riding to make sure the PCs are re-elected?
Yes. I hope that's one of his directions.
Well, certainly, Mr. Speaker, if the citizens of Alberta are well served by not only the foundations but by all the departments, then there's no question this government will be re-elected. The decision of the Minister of Culture is clearly to ensure that the funds are spent in a coordinated fashion so that no dollars are wasted by overlap or duplication, and a wide cross-section of expenditure levels were provided to the board's chairman. Those matters are now in discussion by the board, and I expect that the board will respond after its next meeting and indicate that they understand how those dollars will be spent to benefit the receivers from those who receive the grants from the foundation.
Mr. Speaker, that's outrageous. This is a letter that's already gone out from this minister telling them what to do.
That's right.
And this minister then is saying that these people can't do their job. They have to take direction from him. Mr. Speaker, my question is, well, one of them is a $500,000 grant to the Banff Television Foundation, which just conveniently happens to be in the minister's own riding. My question, that's almost half the new money allocated. My question is, how is this fair to the other foundations in 82 other constituencies? Isn't this nothing more than pork barrel politics?
How convenient. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask the Minister of Economic Development to supplement my answer, but I will indicate this. Prior to the announcement made about a month ago by the minister responsible for lottery funding, there were 5 foundations receiving lottery dollars and 6 other licensees under the Culture and Multiculturalism portfolio. As was indicated in that press release and at that time, the 6 licensees, one of which is the Banff Television Festival, are now grouped under the 4 existing foundations. The money will flow through to all of the recipients, and each of them have received an increase from their previous dollars based on the letter that the Leader of the Opposition has referred to.
Yeah, we got one more.
Mr. Speaker, the Banff Television Festival has become an event that is world-renowned. It's recognized around the world as an outstanding opportunity for filmmakers to demonstrate their skills. And among those filmmakers, Mr. Speaker, are outstanding filmmakers from Alberta. I think that the opposition, in criticizing an event that has grown in stature as a result of the work of the people of Alberta and is now recognized worldwide and attracts people from throughout the world, is unfair in terms of the criticism of the programs that are set up to support this event.
Supplementary question. The minister misses the point. It's a process, and we're talking about a slush fund for this minister. My question is to the Minister of Career Development and Employment. Now, the Minister of Culture's letter indicates the type of abuse that ministerial authority is going on under the existing Act. And my question to this minister, why should we trust this government with additional authority it wants under Bill 10 when it's already circumventing the intent of the existing system? Why should we trust you to spend all the money behind closed doors?
Thank you, honourable member. We're not talking about Bill 10, which has gone past second reading. Supplementary. It's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, honourable member. Edmonton Goldbar. Then rephrase the question without Bill 10.
Hey, Mr. Speaker, so I want this minister to answer how he can justify the type of authority that he's seeking from this assembly when we see the type of abuse coming from this minister.
That's right.
Firstly, Mr. Speaker, the lotteries in Alberta for the last 14 years since they've been established have been handled in the manner in which they're being confirmed in Bill number 10. If the honourable leader of the opposition figures that there's some abuse or some unseemly use of the dollars, I think that he should bring an example forward. We fund a number of organizations. We have over 160 people from across Alberta who decide, who get the dollars in a block funding and then distribute it to organizations throughout the province. Mr. Speaker, to suggest that government is somehow not accountable for its actions is ridiculous. It's government's responsibility to develop policy, make programs, and implement them. Now, whether or not the NDP is in support of those programs, I don't care too much, Mr. Speaker. It's the people of Alberta that this government is responding to.
Thank you. Edmonton Goldbar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again to the Minister of Career Development and Employment on the extra lottery fund monies that were available this spring. Will the minister please tell the House how these monies were in fact distributed? A good deal of them were to go to the Wild Rose Foundation. Were they in fact distributed through the Wild Rose Foundation to their recipients, or will the minister come clean and admit that they were distributed through ministers' constituency offices?
Mr. Speaker, that's a fairly serious charge, and I challenge the honourable minister to prove that statement.
Ma'am, Leader of the Opposition, second main question.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question, the member from Edmonton Strathcona.
My question is to the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs. Earlier this year, C Corporation, a subsidiary of the Eastern food giant Provigo, purchased the Red Rooster chain. The Eastern giant promptly told the Alberta store owners they were franchising the Red Rooster name and charging the owners $21,000 for the use of their own name. $21,000 each, that is, Mr. Speaker. In addition, the stores will have to sell their equipment for a fraction of the cost to these people and only buy goods from C Corp. My question, will the minister assure us that when this corporation's temporary registration under the Franchises Act expires on the 31st of May, it will not be renewed unless these and other greedy and offensive provisions are removed?
Oh, well said, Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The owners and operators of the Red Rooster stores around Alberta have indeed been faced with a serious situation by the new owners, C Corp, correctly identified as a subsidiary of Provigo, which is a Quebec-based company. The Red Rooster owner-operators had formerly been in contract with Horn and Pitfield, and it was Horn and Pitfield that was purchased by C Corp. And those contracts are, of course, individual contracts and vary by and large from individual to individual, although they do follow a pattern. The majority of those, if not all of those contracts, do not have very many clauses in them to protect the owner-operators from what amounts to virtually a unilateral renegotiating of the contract. The matter was brought to our attention primarily through the Securities Commission, which of course has a franchise department, by the owner-operators of Red Roosters. And the director there has been working with them and with C Corp to try to bring the two sides together at a negotiating table with some degree of fair bargaining and balance between the two of them. The owners and operators, at our suggestion, around Alberta formed an association, and there are several hundred of them in Alberta who are now acting in concert through their legal counsel, and we are hopeful that the matter can be negotiated to everyone's satisfaction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's C Corp's contention that they fall within the exemption provisions of the Act, as I'm sure the Minister knows. If this turns out to be so, will the Minister assure us that the Act will be speedily altered so as not to shield robbers posing as capitalists?
The Franchise Act in Alberta is the only such act in Canada, and I'm far more used to hearing representations from Albertans that they would wish the act to be repealed in its entirety on the grounds that it is frustrating the efforts of entrepreneurs and small businessmen. In this particular case, however, we have only limited control over C Corp, as has been pointed out, and to this date we have been attempting, through whatever powers the Act does give and through moral suasion, to attempt to bring C Corp to the table in a fair negotiating stance with the owners and operators, all of whom are small businesses and all of whom we would hope to help.
Well, of course, if the company is not exempt from registration, you have much more control, and probably adequate control. And my question, Mr. Speaker, is it turns out that this Eastern bully, as I would characterize it, who does not want to deal with the Owners Association, is able to impose these rapacious conditions under the existing lease with the old owners. Is the Minister prepared to consider legislation that would disentitle landlords so to oppress their tenants?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there are many options that we are looking to. One of the options, of course, as I spoke to a representative of the Owner-Operators Association, is for the owners and operators to negotiate with another supplier and another landlord, essentially. And if they did that in concert all around Alberta, I think that C Corp would find that to be something of a Pyrrhic victory, a hollow victory, in proceeding as they seem to be doing. The problem does not exist just in Alberta. There are also Red Rooster operators and owners in BC and Saskatchewan, and they too are forming, as I understand, an association and keeping in very close contact. So it is Western Canada, and I think Western Canadians have been able to drive hard bargains before, even with Quebecois, and I would hope with our assistance that the negotiations which are underway will result in a satisfactory agreement.
Well, the purpose of the Franchise Act is to vet the agreement, and so I asked the Minister in particular, will she come down hard on the ban in the proposed agreement on the very thing her government is very big on in another context, namely the right to trade freely?
Free trade with the American and into the American market is indeed one of the things that this government supports, and for all of the right reasons. Bargaining, however, between parties and the freedom to bargain is another thing that we support, and as we've said in other contexts, we are constantly trying to find the right balance so that there is a fairness of bargaining on both sides. In this particular case, in a franchise agreement, which is a contract between the two, we are, as I continue to say, trying to help the little guys.
Thank you. Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon, or main question?
No, supplementary, Mr. Speaker. So with respect to the Franchise Act, to the Minister, is she considering, or is the Minister considering any amendments that would make it easier for the people that are in the or the recipients of franchises to have a sort of a tribunal or board that they could appeal their agreements to from time to time?
Mr. Speaker, that is the mechanism that exists in the Franchise Act, and the tribunal to which reference is made is the Alberta Securities Commission, and that will continue to be the case.
Thank you. Main question, Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, my question is very similar to the opposition leaders. Run back to question on ethics, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday in my exchange with the Premier, he answered that but besides that, I will not only not stop them, I will fight for their right to be helped when they need it. Now, Mr. Speaker, what I'm interested in learning from the Premier, now that appears that ethics are a question of situations and individual judgment from time to time. For instance, is he aware that in British Columbia this is against the cabinet ministers or ministers are censured if they take a flight on a private aircraft for personal reasons?
Mr. Speaker, our responsibilities are for Alberta.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, when he says that if they need help, there have been times, and you know, on the front bench, and many of us in our House occasionally, Mr. Speaker, have been up to our armpits and bankers. Would he consider a minister or a backbencher taking a loan from someone doing business with the government as being unethical?
It's completely hypothetical, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it's not hypothetical. This is a question of ethics. When he says, Mr. Speaker, that I will fight for the right to be helped, would he consider the right to be helped, for instance, if they're feeling tired and run down and would like to accept a vacation of a couple of weeks in the sun at the benefit or at the cost of someone doing business with the government?
Hypothetical.
It's not only hypothetical now, it's silly as well as hypothetical.
Mr. Speaker, it's not so hypothetical for Tories. The next one, how about feeling a little run down psychologically, Mr. Speaker, and they want to tour some of the world flesh pots, like, say, the nude clubs in Berlin or something like that, when they're on a tour around the world. Mr. Speaker, would that be on it?
Thank the honourable member. This is nonsense. Yeah, thank you. The questions are totally out of order. The chair recognizes the member for Clover Bar. Main question.
Mr. Speaker, my question is the Minister of Lands and Wildlife, and it's a local issue but has problems-wide ramifications. Mr. Speaker, this is to do with a letter that's sent to the Minister and a copy that I received about a body of water called Lily Lake, which is just east of Sherwood Park. And the question I have, Mr. Speaker, is that the local authority gave a water ski association permission to use this small lake slough for water skiing purposes. And the question I have to the Minister is, in light of the fact that it is a Crown body of water, what mechanisms are in place to make sure that the land surrounding the area and the waters and the habitat are not endangered when a local authority gives these people permission to use that body of water?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure whether permission was given by the local authority. In the case I've just read the letter this morning, I think the honourable member is referring to a small slough or lake called Lily Lake, and that there was a water ski club that has been encouraged to leave a lake, I believe its name is Hastings Lake, to move to this other body of water. The only restrictions that are on there, Mr. Speaker, policy-wise, is that if there's some reason that there's a safety concern or a navigation concern, that the local landowners can make representation to a committee that's basically an interdepartmental committee made up of the Forestry, Lands and Wildlife, I believe Municipal Affairs, Recreation and Parks and Transportation are involved, and they would review and see if there was some reason for safety reasons or navigation reasons that there should not be allowed that activity on the lake. Then a recommendation is made to the minister, and the minister then refers it on to the federal government, because the federal government has the final authority on water bodies and navigation on water bodies.
Mr. Speaker, then to the minister, what are the guidelines as to why some lakes are limited in they cannot use power boats and other lakes are available for power boat users? What are the guidelines in that case?
Mr. Speaker, I understand that basically for navigation or safety concerns in some areas, if there is unanimity among the groups of landowners in the area, that there is some reason for environmental concerns that it shouldn't be considered, then those representations are made through those advisory bodies and then to the federal government to make the final decision. There are certain water bodies in the province that have limitations on the power size of motors, or whether or not power motors at all would be used.
Mr. Speaker, a final supplementary to the minister. Can the minister assure people that are not happy with the local authority giving permission for these bodies of water to be used in the manner that's described, that there is an adequate opportunity for local people to protest and have adequate opportunity to have public meetings so that their wishes and views can be expressed?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the proper place for them to go is to make their representation to the local council in the area. That would be the initial step. If they feel that they would like to go further than that, I would expect that they could go to the regional committee and make their representation there. The regional committee would only have authority to deal on the issue with respect to safety concerns or concerns with navigation, as I understand it. And that's why I would strongly suggest that the local elected body would be the ones that representation should be made to.
Final. Westlock Sturgeon supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister, I've had some talks with the RCMP on this. My understanding is that due to the Solicitor General cutting the funds, so could the minister tell the House, or would he share with the House whether he will discuss with the Solicitor General maybe more increased funding to the RCMP so that they will not have to withdraw the policing of lakes in order to meet their budget?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not quite sure what that has to do with the initial question. However, there is the RCMP is looking at withdrawing some of their members that have to do with certain federal acts, and but 95% of those responsibilities were carried out by our provincial department in any event. The areas with the federal, the RCMP, there has been great cooperation between the provincial enforcement officers as well as the RCMP, and I'm sure that would be continue. And considering the withdrawal of some 10 members, I would expect it could be enhanced, but the Honourable Solicitor General may wish to supplement my answer.
Solicitor General, briefly.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party was in error to start with that the Solicitor General cutback in funding affected the removal of the boat patrol of the RCMP. That was a federal component of the RCMP that was done unilaterally from the federal government without consultation.
Member for Edmonton Millwoods, followed by Calgary Buffalo. Supplementary, St. Albert.
Mr. Speaker, I've had many phone calls from residents in St. Albert with respect to the boat patrols. To the Minister, will the Minister make representation on behalf of cottage owners and boat owners in the province of Alberta to see that the boat patrols in the province of Alberta are reinstated forthwith?
Mr. Speaker, there were 10 RCMP members within the federal jurisdiction that were assigned to the boat patrol for the entire province. The equipment is remaining in Alberta. Each detachment has the training to use the boats and the various other equipment that goes with them, and the service will be provided by each detachment within the province.
Edmonton Millwoods.
Mr. Speaker, my questions today are the Labour Minister. Yesterday, in response to the issue of exploitation of new immigrant workers, the Minister stated that Bill 21's provision would provide for additional information disseminated more broadly, and that would solve the problem. Now, since the Labour Standards Branch has received some 10,000 complaints last year and in previous years, it seems clear to many Albertans that people are familiar with their basic rights. But the question is, what about convictions? There's only been 5, count them, Mr. Speaker, 5 convictions. And given that, a fraction of a % of complaints, can this minister make a commitment today that he will direct his staff to aggressively pursue a policy of conviction of these sleazy employers?
Accept the word sleazy. Just as yesterday we weren't about to accept another word that was used. Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Millwoods obviously has got a different concept of the kind of society that we live in from the vast majority of Albertans. He obviously is in favour of the police state and hammer anybody without giving them any chance to correct any errors or to otherwise correct their behaviour. The matter of the 10,000 complaints, that's about the only accurate statement that he made. There are about 10,000 complaints, but one has to remember that a complaint does not necessarily mean that there is any breaking of the law. The complaint mechanism is intentionally made very open, and in many of those 10,000 there is in actual fact no breaking of the law. The complaints are based on misunderstandings on the part of the employees. It is well known, Mr. Speaker, and we found this at the many public meetings around this province, that there is not an adequate knowledge of the law in relation to the labour legislation in the province by employers and by employees. It's for that reason that in Bill 21, and indeed in the final report of the committee, there was the emphasis on education of the parties. That emphasis is carried into Bill 22, and that's where much of the situation will be corrected. It is the department's policy, as far as possible, to educate employers when they have broken the law. The vast majority of the employers promptly make any recompense that is required to fulfill the requirements of the statute and the regulations. Where there is a failure for them to do so, then prosecution is initiated. The small number of prosecutions, in fact, indicates that the vast majority of employers do intend to obey the law and do so when the facts are brought to their attention.
Mr. Speaker, in addition to that shameful low record of convictions on the part of this government, how can he expect Albertans to have any confidence in his department when at the same time as the workforce in this province is increasing, he's decreasing officers in the Labour Relations Division?
Mr. Speaker, he just switched subjects completely. The Labour Relations Division has nothing to do with the problems that were being addressed in his first question. And incidentally, I do take grave exception to the remark he made yesterday in the preamble. I didn't catch it yesterday, but this minister and the department have not dismissed any employment standards officer for requesting or recommending a prosecution. So once more, the honourable member for Millwoods was completely wrong.
The evidence supports what I said the other day, and it speaks for itself, Mr. Speaker. But I'm going to ask the minister this. If he is not willing to take any action in regards to protecting employees in this province from unscrupulous employers, will he at least be honest enough to stand in his place and say just exactly that employees in this province are on their own, they can expect no help from this government, and that you've just abandoned the concept of prosecution?
Mr. Speaker, the dishonesty in this room is entirely in the NDP caucus. The minister responsible for career development and myself have been and will continue to communicate with the specific problem of possible abuse of immigrants
who may not know Alberta law. There is another factor that is involved that perhaps the member for Millwoods is completely ignorant of. Many of these immigrants come from societies where a government officer or a policeman in uniform or a member of the armed forces is anything but a friend. There is an education process required in this, and that education process has gone on within the Employment Standards Department. We have concentrated upon this with immigrants. We have held special courses and programs for immigrants held by Employment Standards officers, and we will continue those efforts. They will be, of course, augmented by the investigation that the Minister for Career Development and myself will take part in to make sure that the abuses, such as they are minimised.
Right on, Ian.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier. Since the Minister of Labour is not interested in protecting workers, I'd like to ask the Premier here. We're talking really about the basic concept of respect for law, which the Premier has referred to on numerous occasions. And I'd like to ask the Premier, is he willing to stand today and give an assurance to the people of this province that he and his government will prosecute scummy employers at least as fast and as hard?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member.
The Honourable will withdraw the remark. Thank you. Yep. To the attention of the Honourable Member. All right, if the Honourable Member is being told what to do by another member of the House, perhaps that's what's happening. Is the member prepared to withdraw that phrase?
Mr. Speaker, perhaps there are other words that would describe it just as well, Mr. Speaker, but if it offends anybody's sensitivities, I'll withdraw that word. The Premier knows what kind of friends he's got in the employers that do these kinds of things.
Thank you for the withdrawal, Honourable Member. Mr. Premier.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, the Honourable Minister of Labour dealt with the whole issue, I thought, perfectly adequately for purposes of the member's question. Secondly, the Honourable Member is now dealing in some kind of a hypothetical situation. He has already been challenged by individuals in the legislature, I repeated it yesterday myself, to in fact come forward with the information rather than just make these allegations which he likes to throw out and then hide behind the fact that he's in the legislature.
Chair recognizes. Order, please. I didn't see the hand of anyone else for supplementaries, therefore Calgary-Buffalo main question.
Thank you. It's a related question to the Minister of Labour and to the Minister of Career Development and Employment. The heartland need of immigrant groups is employment equity so that they have a chance to get ahead economically. We've seen, unfortunately, that the government is badly out of touch with the exploitation of immigrant workers. Now, the Ministers of Career Development and Labour have indicated that they are having the situation in issue reviewed, but that the terms of their review are unfortunately so vague they're almost invisible. I'm wondering whether the Minister of Labour has primary responsibility in this area, perhaps supplemented by Career Development and Employment, can give us the precise details about any investigations that he has set in motion, including the terms of reference, the time frame for reporting, and whether, as he indicated yesterday, it will be a case of the Labour Standards Branch investigating itself as opposed to an independent review, as should be the case in this situation.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has brought up a whole number of issues which are completely red herrings. I already said, in answer to the member for Millwoods, that we have held courses for immigrants to the province so that they are aware of the employment standards within the province. The matters that have been brought forward in this House, the specific matters, as opposed to the unfounded wild allegations so intemperately expressed by members of the House. The finite entities are all currently under investigation or have been concluded. The government has been taking action in the past, long before the honourable members read the newspapers.
Well, there obviously is not going to be a meaningful investigation. To the Minister of Career Development and Employment, the main problem is that the government takes a hands-off approach, and then when the problem materializes, they say, well, why didn't somebody tell us this? Now, why has the government even failed to set up a body to monitor the problems and representation of minority groups in the workplace, thereby ignoring the recommendation of the Alberta Heritage Council in 1986 that such a monitoring body is badly needed? Why have you ignored that sensible recommendation?
Mr. Speaker, with regard to my responsibilities for immigration and immigration settlement in the province, firstly, I should let the honourable member know that we do have a series of publications that are published in 6 languages and to be republished in another 6 languages so that individuals know what their rights and responsibilities are as Albertans, and we distribute those through Canada Employment Immigration and our department employment centres, and also through the citizenship courts. We try to our greatest extent possible to get information into the hands of new immigrants so that they know, as the Minister of Labour indicated, that the accessibility that they have here in Alberta is much greater possibly than from whence they came. The honourable member knows, of Calgary-Buffalo, knows that we have established an Immigration and Settlement Advisory Committee. I have talked to that committee and asked them to review this matter. This very committee has recently, in the last 6 months, met with all of the immigration and settlement agencies, the non-governmental organizations, and there has not been, this issue has not been brought to their attention, and this is really the point of contact for new immigrants. Now, Mr. Speaker, it does not mean to say that it is not occurring. It is saying that if it is occurring, then that communication is not coming to us as a government. That Immigration and Settlement Advisory Committee, together with the Premier's advisor on ethnic affairs in the Calgary Premier's office, are there as facilitators. So if people are having problems with government programs or feel that they are being abused by workers as immigrant workers, then we want to assist them. Unfortunately, at this stage, there are no individuals that are coming forward and lodging the complaints from immigrant workers. And so all we can do, Mr. Speaker, is go back into the field and further explore and see and contact leaders of communities and let them know that if there are these concerns, please bring them forward. We'd be pleased to deal with them.
Small wonder you don't know what's going on. The Premier's advisor wasn't even any consultation with the Alberta Heritage Council on that appointment. To the Minister of Labour, even the federal government has an Employment Equity Act which provides for the establishment of procedures and monitoring to encourage fair employment practices in government and amongst large federal employers. I'm wondering why the government refuses to take any commensurate action to address these issues within the provincial government. Why is nothing happening in this province?
Mr. Speaker, he's asking a question that has nothing to do with the primary question. The primary question was related to immigration, and the honourable gentleman is now addressing a specific requirement of the federal government for those who get contracts from the federal government. That is not in the employment standards area at all. It has more to do with the awarding of federal contracts. However, there are requirements in this province for equal treatment of people who are doing the same work or similar work, and that is regardless of all their physical characteristics, their racial origin and everything else. That's part of Individual Rights Protection Act and is enforced in this province through the Human Rights Commission.
The minister is obviously bucking for the Speaker's position. The question dealt with employment equity, and the problems of immigrant women, particularly those who work as domestics, are amongst the most desperate. And I'm wondering if the minister could tell us what type of regulation he has in mind under Bill 21 to ensure fair treatment of domestics and nannies, since they are to be exempted from the labour standards provisions in Bill 21, as is the case under the current Act.
Thank you, honourable member. Employment equity.
Mr. Speaker, the requirements of the people working as domestics will be addressed in the regulations. There is some degree of flexibility required there because some of those people are working under a federal program, others are not. For the domestics, we intend to see that they are treated fairly and reasonably, allowing for the fact that in many cases room and board are provided by the employer, and the flexibility of hours that is required for the work that they do. The honourable member will have to wait until he sees the regulations, as will the rest of Albertans.
Thank you. Member for St. Albert.
Mr. Speaker, the member's initial question made reference to exploitation of workers. One of the ways that this government assists in exploiting those workers is allowing overtime agreements. To the Minister of Labour, when will he stop the practice of overtime agreements that abuse and allow employers in this province to take away monies employees legitimately earn by working overtime?
Mr. Speaker, without getting into debate on the Bills 21 and 22 once more, I would indicate to the honourable member that if he reads that legislation, he will find provisions about time off in lieu and overtime agreements. It's right there if he would care to read it.
The member for Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Agriculture, while trying to defend his negative reports on ethanol, said that in spite of the multi-million-dollar boo-boo, the net benefit to agriculture just isn't there. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to point out that most people in rural Alberta know that you get two products from a still. You get white lightning out of one end and mash out of the other. And I'm wondering if the minister will admit that these reports make another serious multi-million-dollar error by not properly calculating the value of this dried mash as a protein supplement for livestock feed.
Mr. Speaker, no, I will not, because I do take into account in the reports, if the honourable member read the reports thoroughly, the value of the dried mash. I would point out also to the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, that it is important that a price be set for the product, acknowledging that the marketplace is going to set that price. I should share with the honourable member, too, if he has figures contrary to that, we would deeply appreciate them, because the individual who was quoted in the Edmonton Journal, whose information this honourable member is relying on, indicated much the same as just as I have indicated, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the minister says that he wants to discuss this based on facts. Is he denying that the Touche-Ross report says on page 10 that the Alberta livestock industry does not use soybean meal as a protein supplement? What are Alberta farmers going to think about that when they import $21 million a year?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not denying that whatsoever. For the honourable member's information, it is the poultry and the hog people that use soybean meal more so than the cattle people. And I'm sure the honourable member is aware of that. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to underscore what I have consistently indicated to the honourable member, that these papers have been issued for discussion purposes. If one looks at the front of the paper, it indicates it's a discussion paper, so that we could develop, with proper input from individuals concerned, himself included, but unfortunately to date the information that he has relayed to us on each case, and I'm happy to cite the cases again if the honourable member wishes, but acknowledging your time constraints, Mr. Speaker, I won't. He has been wrong, more so than the report.
Well, I can certainly understand the minister being defensive about his credibility on this issue, but I'm wondering, Mr. Speaker, if the minister is aware that in addition to all of the errors contained in these negative reports, that they also seriously underestimate the most promising new market opportunity for ethanol, that is as an octane replacer for premium gasoline.
Mr. Speaker, the applause indicates the worthiness of the question. We know how worthy it is. But I want to indicate to the honourable member, as I have done on a consistent basis, and he attempts to convey a different attitude, and I would like to share with him and the House again. These reports were commissioned by us for information. We've neither accepted nor rejected the recommendations therein. We look forward to dealing with them after we've had an opportunity for additional input, Mr. Speaker. I've indicated to the honourable member we're going to have public meetings throughout the province whereby we can have that valued input. We recognize the importance that it could play, but we also recognize that in the event that the government is going to put taxpayers' money into an ethanol industry, we have to do so on a sound economic base.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the minister hasn't told us if he's going to scrap these reports or if he's going to pay the culprits to do them again, but I'd like to ask the minister how he can stand up and repeatedly make statements based on these error-filled reports that ethanol would require long-term subsidies in order to be viable, when Mohawk Oil has been marketing their ethanol successfully for years.
Yep. Mr. Speaker, the success with which ethanol has been marketed is debatable, as the honourable member, I am sure, recognizes. And as I indicated, and let me reinforce it, Mr. Speaker, there was one error as it related to foregone tax revenue. The honourable member is very misleading in the event that he tries to convey that there's additional errors. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, in the event that there is other debatable points within the reports, that is exactly the reason why we issued this discussion paper, so that we could develop discussion on an informed basis, unlike what the honourable member is attempting to convey, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Bow Valley. Bow Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the minister to tell the House, in regards to the dry mash, how much savings per litre would be if the mash were not dried but fed in liquid form from the manufacturing basis.
Mr. Speaker, that's much like I responded to the honourable member from Vegreville. It depends upon what the marketplace will pay for it. And we haven't got any commitment from the cattle feeders within the province of Alberta that they are interested in the dried or the mash. And until we do so, it's very unfair to draw any conclusions. We based it on the price of soybean.
Time for question period has expired. Might we have unanimous consent to complete this series of questions? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Westlock Sturgeon.
Speaker, supplementary to the minister, since taxpayers paid for a study that even he admits, Mr. Speaker, has boo-boos, would he tell the House whether he's going to ask for the taxpayers' money back from the Tushra study, or are they going to do a new study without the errors in it?
Mr. Speaker, if the report had as many boo-boos as the honourable member, I would discard it. But that's not the case. There was one error within the report that we had commissioned that the Alberta Grain Commission took the lead on. Touche Ross did not uncover that error as it related to foregone revenue. Mr. Speaker, they have to date corrected their information. We have that new information before us on which we can make a very objective decision, plus other information that will be flowing through, as I indicated, too, from other provinces and from the federal government.
Fine.
I refer you to Beauchesne, citation 320, Mr. Speaker, where it clearly indicates that dishonest, a term referred to by the Minister of Labour earlier in question period, is unparliamentary. And I would suggest that the appropriate thing to do would be for the minister to withdraw that remark. And might I also, sir, with respect, point out that in my copy, the 5th edition here, I do not see the word scummy as an unparliamentary word listed.
Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I was responding to the reverse wording that the honourable member used, and perhaps I was more honest in my approach to it than he was. But in view of his sensitivity, I'll withdraw the word dishonest.
Thank you. Two points of order. First one is with regard to the word, I believe was dishonest. Dishonesty. Page 111, since 1958 it has been ruled parliamentary to use the following expression, and that was the word that was employed. Therefore, while it didn't have to be withdrawn, the Chair still appreciates the fact the Minister of Labour did indeed withdraw it. Nevertheless, with regard to point number 2, as raised by the member for Millwoods and also raised in a note to the Chair with regard to the word scummy, as with regard to a previous word used, I think it was scuzzball or something like that, on a previous day, the list that is there is really what reflects the Federal House, what has been regarded as parliamentary or unparliamentary. Whichever house one wishes to apply to in terms of either federal house or the UK Parliament. Also with regard to this particular chamber, it's within the discretion of the chair to respond to words that are used in certain contexts as to whether or not the chair deems them to be appropriate. And that is indeed what the chair has done from time to time. In a previous discussion since June of 1986, the chair also decided that in terms of question period, the chair would not accept the use of the word scab. And it's in that light that the chair ruled the honourable member out of order and asked for the retraction earlier in the day.